All right, grade nines is Mr. Seymour. Once again, I'm coming to you with video number 2 for your good guy Graff essay. And this is, again, you should have watched this one first, the introduction. So if, you should only be listening to this or watching this after seeing that introduction. So in this one, I'm going to go into more detail about what a thesis statement is, how to use your citations and quotes. I'm going to go through this essay example a little bit and talk a little bit more in detail about what your essay should look like. So, looking at our essay, hopefully at this point you've decided on a side that you're going to take, whether Graff is guilty or not of mistreating the children at Battle School. And so at this point, you're thinking, how do I start my essay? And the first thing you want to do is come up with a thesis statement. And what a thesis statement is, I'll kind of type in this document right here. The thesis statement, highlight it. I'm going to get all fancy here. Highlight it yellow, maybe. We're going to highlight the thesis statement yellow in this essay below. So Colonel Hiram Graff is facing the aftermath of the death of one of the students under his supervision. Graff is also in the difficult situation where he caused some of his students to be in emotional trauma. Ender Wiggin had several nightmares through the Bugger War. Colonel Graff, people say he may have manipulated Ender, but he was only doing his job. When Ender volunteered to be part of the battle school, he told him it would be painful. Ender agreed. Oh my gosh, my dog is crying so much. Graff shouldn't be held responsible for the trauma and the pain that Ender had to go through. Because they agreed to go, they were encouraged but not forced. His job is very important. Colonel Graff tried to do everything he could to save the human race, even if that involved a war or a few battles. I don't want to go, said Ender, but I will. That's and then the page number there. Okay, so where in all of this is the thesis statement? And this is sort of like an intro, 2 paragraphs, which is acceptable. This student wrote this. There's no thesis statement in this. Sort of just like a sort of a warm up to the essay, which I said is fine. And here she actually gets into the actual introduction where the thesis statement can be found. So this is not a thesis statement here. Colonel Graff, people say he may have manipulated Ender, but he was only doing his job. But I would say that this here is the thesis statement. Okay, so what you're looking at here, it's basically the argument that you're going to prove throughout the thesis statement is the argument you're going to prove throughout your essay. So when Ender volunteered to be a part of battle school, he, Graff, put that in brackets, told him that it would be painful, and Ender agreed. So I would say that is the thesis statement. Maybe this whole combination of sentences is the thesis statement. It's basically the point that this student is going to prove throughout the rest of the essay. And then she goes on to say, Graff shouldn't be held responsible for the trauma and pain that Ender had to go through. Because they agreed to go, they were encouraged but not forced. So because Ender basically had to choose to go to battle school, and she gives an example here, that's the point she's making. So she's going to go on to prove that further in the other paragraphs of the essay, but this right here is the thesis statement. So let's highlight that in yellow so that you can see it. Okay, that's the thesis statement. When you make arguments in your essay, you're not going to want to. You're going to need to support them with quotes. Now, luckily, we've actually provided quotes right here, evidence for and against, right? So you can straight up use these, or you can go to the PDFs of the book that I gave you, that you read, and find your own. That's totally fine too. If you go on Google, I'm sure that you can search for quotes from the book. You can find them that way as well. And here we've got examples in the PDF of paragraphs you might use, similar to what I just showed you. But here's the section on using quotations. So when you copy passage from a novel, short story, or nonfiction source and put it word for word into your own essay, it could be or would be what's called plagiarism. Everybody's probably heard that big, bad, scary word. Plagiarism is stealing somebody else's work, and I'll add presenting it as your own idea. So if you steal somebody else's work and then say it was somebody else's work, that's not plagiarism. That's allowed. You're allowed to take other people's ideas as long as you give them credit. When it becomes plagiarism or stealing is when you present it as your own idea. So that's bad. Sometimes you need to use a passage word for word in order to make your point, and here's the trick. As long as you punctuate it correctly and give credit to the original writer, it's not stealing or cheating. It's called quoting from a source. So here's how you quote from a source correctly, and this is how I want you to do it. First, you're going to use it word for word, so it has to be exactly as it appears in the book. Same capitals, same periods, same everything. Everything has to be the same. Second, you're going to use quotation marks to show that you're referring to someone else's words. Here's an example. On page 8 in Ender's Game, we can find this passage. He turned and walked away. Nobody followed him. So if you were going to use this passage in your essay, you would need to put quotation marks around it, like these here and these here. All right, that shows that you stole it from the book, right? If the passage in the book has quotation marks in it already, like something that Ender said, the thing that Ender said gets the single quotes right there, and then the double quotes go on the outside of everything. So single quote, the beginning and end of what Ender said, and then double quotes for the whole thing. Finally, you need to give credit to the original author. In an essay like this, where we know all of the quotes are coming from Ender's Game, we can give credit to Orson Scott Card simply by indicating a page number. So when you get into larger, when you're in grade 10, 11, and 12, and you have multiple sources and multiple things, you don't need to, you will need to sort of say who it's coming from. But in a situation like this, where your only source is the book, you don't need to say card page 8. You can just say page 8. We can take that shortcut. And the way you do it is you put it in parentheses, or otherwise you know them as brackets, but these sort of soft brackets called parentheses. So you can say page 8. And if we go back to my student's essay here, you're going to see that exact thing. His job is very important. Colonel Graff tried to do everything he could to save the human race, even if that involved a war or a few battles. And here's the quote. You notice that there's double quotes, and then the single quote for Ender. If I can blow this up a little bit for you. So double quotes, and then a single quote, and then what Ender said, I don't want to go, single quote, said Ender, single quote, but I will, single quote, double quote, and then the page number. All right, that's how you cite a source, and you can see this student just said his job is very important. Colonel Graff tried to do everything he could to save the human race, even if that involved a war or a few battles. This student didn't build up to the fact that it was using the book, but if you wanted to, you could add this here. You could say that is shown in the book when Ender said get rid of this here. You could do this as well if that makes you more comfortable. Some students have difficulty transitioning into that quote, and if you're having trouble with that, you can literally say that is shown in the book when Ender said, then blank, right? Okay, so then we're going to get into our body paragraphs. Graff was Ender's #1 supporter and had belief in him. He told everyone that he indeed was the best out of all of them to push to work harder. If Graff was hard on Ender, you need to realize that his job is very stressful and demanding. He needed to do the best he could to get Ender's army to defeat the buggers. All the concerning things that happened during the Bugger War was tragic, which we capitalized. But the role Graff has is that he had a job and that he needed to do the best he could to save humanity. Ender's position as a student was really difficult, but not because of Colonel Graff. Graff, in fact, made Ender's job easier to do by pushing him and making him the best soldier that Ender can be. And here's another quote. Take a look at him, little boys. He's going to be a commander when you're still in diapers up there, because he knows how to think in null gravity, and you just want to throw up. And that, again, should have single quotes on the inside of it here. Like that, okay? And then page 25, perfect. All right, so let me add so there's lots of ways to introduce quotes in your writing. You don't need to feel like you have to do it exactly like this, but the formatting, the way it looks, does have to look like this. But there's lots of ways to build up to it or transition into it. I've just shown you one example. But the main thing you should know here is that any point, and this is really important, and I'm going to type this out so we're really clear. Any point you make in your essay should be with an example or a quote. I cannot stress this enough. You cannot make unsubstantiated claims in an essay. You can't just say Colonel Graff shouldn't be held responsible for the trauma and then walk away from that statement. You need to prove it, right? if you're going to say that Graff was Ender's #1 supporter and have belief in him, you need to prove that. You need to prove that. You can't just say it, because that doesn't make it true. You need to prove it by either pulling a quote from the book, right, or prove it showing an example of when that happened. And so for that quote, so for example, this student here, saying Graff was Ender's #1 supporter, she supports that point by saying, take a good look at him. He's going to be a commander. So like, this is a perfect example of Graff supporting Ender and declaring his support for him, right? Because he believes in him. So you cannot make a statement without backing it up in your essay, right? That's if you do that, you're automatically opening yourself up for me to disagree with you. And you need to prove your points. That's what makes it a sort of a solid bulletproof essay. The final thing that I'm going to ask or mention here is that you really want to stay away from I think, I believe, it's my opinion kinds of statements. All right. I'm going to add this here. All right. When you say I think, and you notice that this student did a very good job of not doing that, all right? Here, even in conclusion, when the student writes it in this format, in conclusion, I think Colonel Hiram Graff was only doing what he needed to do. What this does, and I've said this to some of you already this year, what this phrasing does is it allows the reader to say, well, I disagree. That's your opinion, and I have my opinion, and I'm entitled to my opinion. Wrong. When you write this essay, you are writing it conclusively, and you are writing it to illustrate a point that you believe to be correct. In other words, it's not what you think, it's what you know. It's not your opinion, it is fact. So when you write this, you should not be using the letter I to do anything. You notice the only time we see it here is when it's a quote from the book. We go back through and you look at the way this was written, there are no moments where the writer, the girl who wrote this, said I think, or I want to say, or in my opinion, or anything like that. The letter I does not appear. In this case, nobody should. She didn't say in this case I believe that nobody should be considered guilty. She didn't say that, right? She said in this case there's no room for discussion on this. She said in this case nobody should be considered guilty. All of this was a form of self-defense for Ender in the Bugger War. Blah 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 blah. It's a very solid and defendable statement, and then she provides evidence later on in the paragraph with quotes. So once again, if you want to be successful in this essay, you should keep those opinion statements out. Be concrete, make your arguments solid, and avoid I think statements, because all they do is make your argument seem soft. Okay. I think that's all I'm going to talk about in this one. I'm not sure what else I'd like to add at this point. But this should help you get going. Once again, as you're writing your essay, I want to be able to open up your document and look at it, which is why in the previous introduction video, I said I want you to write it in this document. And so what I will do is as you're writing it, and I'll show you, maybe I'll do that right now, I will actually come in and I will give you write comments. I can do that right here, where I say, hey, this is super smart, right? Or whatever. So over here, you can see, I'll zoom back out a bit. You can see my comment to you is, hey, the super smart. You can reply to me. You can mark it as resolved to make it go away if you want. But that's my way of giving you feedback. The other thing that I can do is make suggestions. So maybe I'm going to select this. And over here, I'm going to go to suggesting, right? And I'm going to, when I hit delete, it's going to give you this green mark like this. It's like a strike through. And then you can either approve or disapprove of it. So if you approve of it, it just deletes what was said. So these are examples of ways that I'm going to kind of give you feedback. And then you can either keep it or not keep it or whatever. But I want to kind of help everybody get up to the point where they're getting a 30 out of 30 on this essay. It's just a matter of how much feedback you want from me. Anyway, shouldn't do that. Sorry, still on suggesting. I think that's all I'm going to give you for today. Like I said, if you have any specific questions, let me have them. What I'm really hoping here is that I can give you specific feedback, and after you've done some writing, meet with you on Google Meet to actually sort of talk with you one-on-one about your work. And that's my hope for before the end of the year, so I can help you be better writers going into grade 10. Do what you can, and good luck, and I'll to be talking to you after you make some progress. Thanks a lot, and hope everybody's doing well.